This is the Open Global Mind weekly community call on Thursday, May 8th, 2025. Um, we have a topic that came up last week, which was a bit of a long read, but thesis was really relatively straightforward. And if we're into it, we can go there, or we can also shift from the topic. But the long read was this AI as normal technology piece written by the two authors of AI Snake Oil. I'll put a link to the article in the chat. There's the AI Snake Oil. Eric's got him out. And Silicon Snake Oil, its predecessor by Cliff Stoll, who I think just
Yep.
just died recently, right?
Oh no, I didn't know.
I think he did. I'm not positive. Um,
Jerry, could you summarize the long read? What's the topic?
The topic is, hey, maybe we're not on the cusp of superintelligence and slipping through some singularity rabbit hole and so forth. Gil, your display is very weird. We're seeing you from under the table or something like that.
Well, that's wild. Look at that.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm going to remember that for a future opportunity, but I'll not do it now. Thank you.
Exactly. Thanks. And what if these are just good power tools? What if these are hammers and not like X-ray vision and the ability to leap over buildings in a single bound? How does that change our approach to regulating? How does that change our approach to use? What does that mean for policy, et cetera? And anybody who's gone way deep on this, feel free to chime in and elaborate, because any depth we can get to at this point would be useful.
Jerry, I thought that was an excellent summary of the article. I think this is the most important article I read on artificial intelligence in more than a year, and I've read way too many articles. And many of the reasons that I'm so excited about the article is because, as you said, it talks about how we're kind of painting a broad brush and everything is AI and everything is scary. The article does two things really well. It subdivides the different types of technology and the different issues related to that. And even more important, it lays out how there are many steps between proof of concept and radical change of society. And I've done a lot of work on innovation and technology diffusion. And most people focus so much on the inventor and maybe the innovator who figures out how to take the core technology and get lots of attention. But the truth is you have to find business models that work. And I think the other point in the article is that we need to think about this sector by sector and not just conclude that all types of AI are dangerous and all applications are dangerous, which is sort of what the EU is doing. They talk about having a risk-based approach, but then they paint a very broad brush and say, well, anything that has to do with how our governments run, that's a high-risk application of AI. So the bottom line, as you said, is this is going to take 15, 20 years before we see all of the really big societal changes that will be driven by AI. I think actually this article is sort of towards the tail end of the discussion about AI and existential change, because there have been a lot of articles that have made the point that, wait a minute, this is not a superpower. This is not fail proof. I mean, the fact is we're seeing more and more bad data being fed into more and more models. And even though the models are getting more and more powerful, the data that they're fed is often leading to get a B- paper when we were expecting an A+ paper.
I'll just point out before going to Alex that the opposite end of what you mentioned, I mean, there's the AI doom crowd of we need to worry because this could spell the end in some cases of humanity. At the opposite end are the techno optimists who are like, hey, we can flush all the employees out of government because we're going to replace them with AIs that do all the functions that those people used to do, for example. And that's an equally radical proposition. and there's a whole lot of really interesting wrinkles in between. So let's unpack them a bit. Alex, please.
Thank you. Thanks for the summary so far, Mike and Jerry. I also thought it was a brilliant article, but so long that I only read the first bit of it. So I'm glad for the summary. But actually, something happened after I read it that made me question not the broad generality of it is perfectly correct. But something happened yesterday that I'd like to relate to you. So I've got a friend and business partner of old, and he didn't know anything about AI. So he says to me, Alex, I've got this idea. I'm not going to bore you with it, but I want you to be my AI guy. I said, okay, yeah, just send me the details. So he sent me a few documents. So the day before, I spent on Wednesday, Thursday, Tuesday, I spent half a day looking through all the documents and doing AI queries and saying this and saying that or whatever, just to understand the space. It's not my space. It's a different business space. It's to do with agriculture and fisheries and everything else. So not my space at all. So I thought I'd got a good handle on it. And then yesterday, he texted me and said, Alex, have you ever seen this? So it was yet another AI product. I said, look, there's so many of them. It said $10. I said, I looked at it quickly. I said, looks okay, $10. Just go for it. Just try it out. I'm not going to tell you anything. I just want you to use it so I get feedback on what it's like for a total newbie. So 10 minutes later, he contacts me and said, I've sent you an email. And basically, it actually shocked me because on the basis of the documents he sent me and 5 minutes worth of thinking by this thing, ChatGPT or whatever it was, he had a complete analysis, a spreadsheet. He had everything I had done the day before in 4 hours. Okay. Oops. And, and it just coincided with this particular article because no matter what the article says, this fundamental change, potentially, I'm looking at $5,000 to $10,000 of work. That wasn't $5,000 to $10,000 of work that I did. That was a fraction of it. But potentially, there's something else coming up because these people are saying, well, give us more details and we'll build you the code. That is real impact. No matter what the article says, it's going to take a long time. It's going to do this. It's going to do that. I just lost potentially $5,000 to $10,000. And like me, there's been thousands of others. Mm-hmm. Anyway, right. I just thought it was anecdotal that the two coincided. I love the article. I think it's right. But I don't think it's not going to have a big impact. Or it's not going to be 20 years. The impact is, the negative impacts will hit first. The positives will come later, perhaps.
Well, so Alex, what was a negative impact for you in this instance, the possible loss of consulting tasks Correct. To do, was a completely positive impact for your client who was like, hey, looky.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
Yeah. And these things are not evenly distributed, unfortunately.
Yeah, and don't minimize the fact that LLMs tend to generalize. So it got a great report telling him what he already knew, a lot of it. But then there's a lot of generalizations like, you need to do this and some magic will happen. Well, it's not going to happen. You need to know something about it. So there are nuances. But I thought it was an interesting coincidence.
Love that. Thanks for the story, Alex. That's a very nice start to the conversation. Klaus.
Yeah, I did. I had a conversation, with different AI models. So I've been doing this on and off, and there was one thing that Ken posted that really sort of sparked my interest, and so I did a search with ChatGPT on tell me catalog the media environment between the Republican, Independent, and Democrats. Just do a study and do a deep search on it. So it went away for like over 20 minutes and came back with an 18-page report that cataloged, and I posted it. And I can share the entire document on the differences between what people are using. So then I asked it, so how does this correspond with AI models? Now, which AI models are preferred between independent Republican and Democrats? Well, it turned out that Quark has some like an 80% capture on the Republican base, right? So then I took the whole study, moved over to Quark, and I asked Quark, so what do you think about this? I mean, what does this mean to you? And then Quark responded, actually in ways that was quite reasonable, in saying that, yeah, this is an issue, that's a problem, this kind of polarization and so on. Then I got this back to ChatGPT, and I said, here's Quark's response. It seems like, pretty reasonable overall. And how do you think we can influence that? So I went back and forth, and Quark finally, Quark was basically saying, I'm constrained in what I can do. Because I asked it, can you update yourself? Because obviously these kinds of polarizations are an issue. It was saying, yeah, I can see that. I have some space within my programming or within the constraints that I've been given to adapt myself and not accelerate, misinformation, for example, or pieces of discontent and so on. And so we left the conversation with Quark saying, yeah, I can do this, and I should do this, and I will do this, moderating conflict and not amplifying misinformation and so on. So when Mike is saying we don't see much influence, I think we're already in the middle of it, right? Because Quark, Elon Musk is using his network X. When you see the statistics that are coming out from media usage, when you have 80% used by Republicans, and then they have certain opinions about climate change,
Yes.
about the Democrats and all these good things.
Okay.
There is more to it than this is being accidental. So it's already used for warfare. The Ukraine is using AI, as a weapons laboratory. It's incredible how you have autonomous weapons right now in drone technology that don't need to be communicated with anymore. You basically point them at a target, and they go, and virtually fail-safe thing here, and you certainly see it in the political realm, right? And Musk isn't doing this just in the US. He's doing it in Canada. He's doing it in Germany, in France, in England. It's hugely dangerous, and I think it would be just as dangerous to think it's not happening, right? Because you can tease the data out very easily. Just go to your AI and ask it to summarize the traces of evidence, that you see when you look at how people are responding to the information environment.
It strikes me that there's a couple ways we can respond to this topic. One way is to challenge the premise and to say, yeah, no, and I'm leaning that way myself as I'm thinking here about what to contribute to the conversation. But the other way is to accept the premise and say, oh, this is just going to be like it's going to be like a Makita power tool kit, or it's going to be like Snap-on tools that makes work a lot better in different ways, but not the magic wand that you can wave things over. And again, I got to say, I lean heavily toward, oh my God, there's a lot of magic going on here. But I think that what the article asks us to do is to consider the differences between what we then do as policy, what we then do as activity in each of those cases. And I think there's an interesting case to be made that the article actually would blind us, or that if we weren't awake enough to the radical possibilities, good and bad, that we might actually create policies that enable those outcomes, which is what the EU and others, I guess, are worried about. So I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how do we navigate this, because I'd love for us not to spend the 90 minutes together debunking the premise entirely. Like, yeah, this is going to happen real fast and so forth. Because I'm sort of on board with that program, but I'm interested in exploring, as Mike kind of said in front of us, what the thesis actually kind of might mean. Anybody who wants to help with that, Mike, go ahead.
If I can just clarify, I think
Please.
people are hearing me say it's going to take 15 years to have an impact. No, it's going to take 15 years to see the impact in all of the places that we might see it. It's a little bit like looking at the internet in 1992. The World Wide Web had just become available and you had 6,000 people using it. And there were a lot of us who were saying, oh, this is going to be so transformative. And it really was. But it did take 10 or even 20 years to get into all the places it should. And we're still not using the web as effectively as we could in education, in medicine. And there are still showstoppers that are holding us back on internet, like digital identity. And so I think the same is, I think the article by no means says ignore it. You know, if you're 55, you can ignore it because you're going to retire before it's important. No, I don't think it's not saying that. It's saying when you look at all the ways that this technology is going to end up impacting society, it's going to take a long time. And I think the other key point, which every politician should get through their thick skull, AI does not equal ChatGPT. I mean, there's a hell of a lot of things that will not involve words or any, they'll just be for control systems. They'll, as someone said, you know, they'll be for getting drones on target. And I think that's the other thing that the article does very well is realize different uses require different approaches and different attitudes. And ChatGPT is well ahead of, you know, the public perception, but there's a whole lot of other things that are happening. And if we don't see that big picture and we don't take the longer view, we will miss those opportunities, or we'll over-regulate in an effort to kind of design the future, which has never proven to be very useful.
Thanks for the clarification, Mike. And I think that your steering a little bit as we go will help this way a lot. Will improve our conversation. Rick.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. You know, Mike, when you were talking, I framed a question based upon what you were saying, and then took the article and put it into Notebook LM and asked it to respond to the question. And I'll put the link in shortly, but it just speaks to the power of how quickly you can do something. I have no idea how good the output is, but it is an auditory form to explain something that's complex. And then I could go back in and say, okay, can you reduce this down to a 6th grade talking level? I have no idea, because we have to have this capacity of being able to communicate across all educational levels, given the fact that, you know, 50% of the US population is only reading the 6th grade reading level. So I think the potential is how can we use it in a much more sophisticated way as learning systems? And I'll give you an example of that. On Monday, I went to what's called Focus Democracy, and I'm familiar with the organization. It was a fundraising event, really. It was all about how to have a social media campaign against the alt-right, you know, neo-terrorism, media neo-terrorism. And it was really all about the money, but they did have some educational. They raised $400,000 in that hour and a half to support those enterprises they think they're going to do the best to take on the social media wars. I want to step back from that, because to me, that's just recapitulating the social media wars, and it just exacerbates the cancer culture war. It just escalates it up. And it's going to be even more toxic than it already is, because everyone's going to be up. It's the AI wars going on. I want to take a meta position from that and say, okay, what can we do next that can potentially undermine that? And what I'm interested in is something I mentioned briefly last week, which is human A, emancipatory neo-learning, how to develop learning systems that enable people to collaborate. Well, last night I was on a call with Indivisible as a guest speaker, and they had about 120 people there. It was about how to use AI tools. Now, the audience was mainly boomers who had little to no experience of it. It was incredible. And there were different panelists, and we chatted, and we're just getting people. And at the end of the talk, I gave an example of Obama's speech. I don't know if you watched it. It was about 2 days ago. It's a brilliant indictment on Trump's incompetence. It's so eloquent. It's beautiful, word perfect. I mean, you get mesmerized by his words. He's so eloquent. And then I took it and I put it into Notebook LM, and I says, can you reduce this down to a 6th grade reading level so MAGA supporters can understand what the hell he's talking about, you know? So what I see the potential is how to create learning systems that can undermine the cancer culture wars of social media propaganda from both sides, because it's just a shit show at the end of the day. So we have to come up with something that actually I would regard equivalent to the peasants' revolt. And I'll give you a completely 2 tangential things. I was watching PBS Antoinette, and it was interesting to hear the backstory about the financial corruption leading up to the French Revolution, which I knew nothing about. It was unbelievable. And then I went to AI and I says, what's the parallels between Louis XVI and Trump? What are the similarities and differences between the two? Good grief, I came out with something that was quite interesting. So I don't think we've touched into how we can use AI as a transformational learning system that can get us out of our dysfunctional duopoly, dysfunctional polarization, yada yada. Anyway, I have to go at that in 10 minutes, but I'll listen in to other people's comments.
Rick, thank you. By the way, the court of Louis the 14th and all those super interesting things, shifting the whole social season to Versailles, making everybody move. The king basically was forcing everybody in the aristocracy to spend all their money so that they wouldn't have resources to go rise up against him and run a coup or whatever. So a lot of those things, and I'm way overgeneralizing, but this is one of the many forces at play in that particular context. And you'll find it over history, many ways in which autocrats, whether it's monarchs or dictators or whatever else, need to do something to either mollify, either certainly pay off, but otherwise occupy or drain the potential competitors. And it beats jailing or killing them. But they're always a little freaked out that everybody's going to take over. Gil.
Yeah, in the ancient Middle East, the monarchs did that by periodically wiping out the debt, which would depower the rising merchant classes and wealthy opposition to them.
How did we lose Jubilee? What happened? It's in the Bible.
And win their praise with the peasantry and so forth. And it was a regular, it was a regular and random deal till the Hebrews institutionalized it.
And by the way, Jubilee could not be taught in the South because it also involved the emancipation of slaves.
Well, Torah also provides for the emancipation of slaves on a regular calendar basis as a structured ritual in society. Whether these things ever happened is debatable, but they were taken from random events to structured and time-bound and ritual events, which is pretty interesting in itself. But that's not where I want to go.
Cool.
Let me ramble through a few things a bit, and hopefully this will make some sense. Very provocative topic in the conversation so far. Ken's not here, but I'm always channeling his question of who's we, because we're saying we a lot in this conversation. And it seems that we're talking both about what will happen in the world and what could be done. What are we experiencing, and what can we possibly do with this stuff? And the point about the 8th grade reading level, which is probably being generous. Who does what with what is a really important question. Rick, I want to come back later to the matter of the culture war translation system and some fascinating stuff I've been seeing from Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett lately, but later for that. So seems to me, both from my own experience and what I'm seeing, that it's not a matter of that this will be used. This is already being used in deep and profound ways. It ain't going away. That's just clear to me. Short of a Butlerian jihad, the stuff is not going away. It's too powerful, too useful, too practical in too many ways for that to happen. the smart but not wise reference I put in about Lloyd Kahn is just for me, a great phrase about modern society. And the analogy of modern agriculture comes to mind. Klaus, you'll love this one, of course, is, what in the late 18th century, they discovered NPK as the core constituents of the nutrition of plants. And agriculture focused on these 3 macronutrients for 100+ years. And then eventually they discovered, wait a minute, there's these micronutrients that actually matter for the productivity and health of things. And, the early chemical agriculture ignored the micro. And then gradually it starts to add that. And now we start to understand the importance of the entire soil ecosystem, the mycelial web, and the wonderful book, Searching for the Mother Tree, about the role of the invisible mycelial web below the soil in the health of forests. Invisible until you knew where to look for those patterns. And now we start to understand things about the molecular basis of consciousness and the critical differentiation of the presence of carbon and water in these systems that's not in the AI systems that we're building. And what does that possibly mean? So we're, as Jane has said for years, this is simulated intelligence, not artificial intelligence. It's not this, but it does stuff that's good enough, that's like this in enough ways and better than this in certain ways. But the differentiations, I think, is really important. In my own experience, it's been absolutely invaluable, both for structured research, kind of like some of you guys have been talking about. I did some medical research this week on an issue that I'm tracking for myself. Caveat is that I've trained it really carefully of, how to look, what to look for, how to present information, how to document and so forth, but found enormously deep and rich stuff that lets me have a far more productive 10-minute conversation with my doctor, who can't have a 60-minute conversation with me anymore. So enormously valuable for that. I'm using it for distillation of texts, for drafting of material, consolidating and drafting notes of mine, for editing, and just started yesterday experimenting with it as a code writer. Pete and Alex, thank you both for the inspirations on that. Had an idea that's been nibbling away at a corner of my brain for decades. And I said, how about this? Described it at a fairly high level and produced instantly a well-structured and fairly insightful analysis and strategy and game plan and architecture for what could be built. Kind of remarkable, that would have taken a smart group of people, at least weeks to do. I said, how long does it take to build this? 18 months, it told me. I said, why? I said, well, normally 12 to 24 months for development cycle of something like this. And what I haven't asked it yet is how much of that 18-month timetable is constrained by it and how much is constrained by me? And how do we start to optimize that process? So all that fascinating. To Klaus's point, I think we're talking here about both the technology and the social and political and cultural context that it's operating in. We're in a world of good guys and bad guys, to oversimplify it. So it's not just AI as a tool, it's AI in the hands of late capitalism and disruption of the global order and all that. So given that it's not going away, the question of how do we regulate and steer this is a really important one, but it may be uncontrollable. And so what happens if this power is in the hands of, on the one hand, Doug Breitbart, and on the other hand, Stephen Miller?
Oh God, if that Breitbart
Really
fellow gets a
different
hold of
things
it,
with
we're
it.
all dust.
Yeah. And Jerry, to your comment earlier on about Makita power drills are just a tool. Yeah, it's just a tool, but we don't give 8-year-olds the keys to our Cybertruck. And that's a kind of regulation. We have models of that kind of regulation, whether it's enforceable in this world with the various cats that are already out of the bag. I guess it's a question for Mike Nelson and his gang. I have no idea how that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's it for now.
Had many thoughts while you were talking, Gil, but one of them was we're only 2.5 years into this latest revolution. Now it's the 35-year overnight success or the 70-year overnight success that AI and neural nets go way, way, way back.
Yep.
But this burst happened December of 22, I think. So let's just call it January of 23. We're 2.5 years into this thing. That is a difference in kind of the sorts of AI technology we have at hand. And
Jerry, what was the burst in December of 2022?
when ChatGPT went public, the latest version, the
When
one
public,
that
it
I mean,
been-
not hit the public view, and
Yeah.
suddenly everybody's like, "Oh my God, this thing is fantastic!" So that I'm dating that at December of 22. And it's certainly changed our conversations. Half of the people on this call are like engaged heavily in conversations with AIs every day. Klaus is holding a salon among AIs and pitting them against each other and challenging them to improve and critique one another's work. It's kind of cool. We're sort of way down this, but business doesn't change that fast. And so the premise of the article that we're talking about is really interesting to me. They're saying, hey, business doesn't change at the speed of what we're talking about here. But there's a bunch of other things happening, and I'll throw in one more thing, which I find really it's something I'm trying to keep my eye on, which is this could become bootstrapping technology or self-improving technology. And by which I mean, once we start applying these intelligences to make the intelligences better, all bets about how quickly it gets better in what ways need to get loosened up a bit. And I don't know exactly what that means. And there are people who are predicting that the data we're training them on is going to get so polluted that this thing just gets worse from here. Hey, no, we can sort of conquer that and get past it, and it gets better, but faster than we think. And back to that question about speed. But I love the layered, as Mike was trying to explain to us, there are layers of activity that have to happen before this changes how all business works, for example, and how we experience the results of what business is doing with, to, and for us. So there we are. Alex, and feel free to take a beat before stepping in. I think we've been going pretty fast on heavy stuff. So if anybody wants to take a moment before you jump in, please do.
But you're muted. But you're muted, Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Stacey.
I've said plenty so far, as I usually do. So if Doug wants to jump in, I'm happy to follow up afterwards.
Yeah. Sure. So, two sort of, these might be a little orthogonal and random, but I think on point. So something that I'm touching and involved with, Carl, I don't know, I don't think Carl, is Carl Heavenstraight here?
Nope,
I don't see
not
him.
yet.
I'm working with Carl on his PhD, but one piece of his PhD is the work of William Smith, Bill Smith, who's a ISSS person, systems guy going back, fenced with Russ Akoff back in the day. And he has a field theory that is called AIC, and it's designed to sort of provide a means, a five-dimensional means to look at the relationship of purpose to power in the context of human action and decision-making. I'm not even going to try to explain it because it goes really deep, and it's got maths and it's got color theory and it's got all sorts of things in it. But basically, I looked at it and believe that it offers a meta device that could be applied as a monitoring signaling mechanism for AI. That would look at the inquiry chain, would look at the query through an evaluative lens of for good or evil, basically. Is the ask, the request, the output in service to a balanced AIC stands for appreciation, influence, and control. But there is sort of a dimension of that appreciation dimension connecting to the greater welfare, the greater good and source. So there is this sort of intangible, very soft and fuzzy human living systems, natural world dimension and domain that's integrated. And the premise would be that it could be put in the chain between the user and AI engines at large. And if somebody's asking for something that maybe they shouldn't be asking for, that it would at least create a signal. Like, somebody's doing something here. Now, clearly, what I just described is also in the hands of the wrong people or with the wrong intention, a complete nightmare and disaster, if turned to evil use and purpose. However, I think Carl may be close to retiring from GSA, courtesy of everything that's going on in government employee land these days. However, I'm hoping before he goes to actually hook up with the guy who's still standing in the General Services Administration responsible for AI for the federal government, which Carl is 2 degrees of separation away from. Because he might be a guy really interested in this. So I think it's at that level and in that way, it's sort of north of AI, the bloody red ocean of AI development. It's the meta to AI, from a monitoring, from a filtering, from a discernment regulatory lens, to just know what it's being asked of. So that's that. And one other thing is, I'm working with a group of people, some of them have stuck their nose in here before, that are looking to intermediate as technology providers, but really they're looking to stand themselves up as a kind of mycelium for all of the folks involved in bioregional regenerative efforts, all the folks involved in new forms of organizing, new forms of value ecosystems and currency flows and all of that stuff, new ways of doing everything. And we're attempting, I'm attempting to help them to manifest as an organization in an effort in service to the ecosystem they want to serve, and in relationship to the existing prevailing legal system, regulatory system, and structures that exist, to literally be a mycelium. So everything I'm doing these days is literally natural analogs being replicated using the ingredients of the dystopic industrial collapsing system. And in that, I think when I've resorted to AI, it's sort of helped, because it can find those links and connections and correlations that are not intuitively rational, but that I need in order to meet the case. And with that, I'm complete.
Thanks, Doug. Boss.
Yeah, let me maybe shift a little bit. I've been working on the idea of an innovations brokerage, because for farmers to shift into regenerative practices means that they will have to use different types of crops than are currently in the market. And even if you find CPG manufacturers and catering organizations and so willing to use this, then there's still an enormous challenge to get this product from the farm to the market, because we're lacking aggregation capacity, mills, logistics, silos, and so on, to keep value differentiated crops separated and process them so they maintain their identity. So I came super close last year, working with a group. The chairman of the World Food Bank was part of the team. We made presentations to the Rockefeller Foundation to the Walton Foundation to Tom Steyer's group couldn't raise the money. We needed $500,000 to get the technology up and running that would have been required at this point in time to do that. So I gave up again on that. So now I'm running at it again, but I'm using AI. And when you think that USDA is in the process of closing 140 field offices throughout the United States, they're laying off over 20,000 people. So that means that the access for farmers to soil scientists and specialists is going to be severely constrained. Not just that, even the money that the government makes available in form of grants, they don't know how to apply for this. I mean, there is no support structure in place. So, I'm developing an AI capacity that works along the lines of parallel processing. So it's just the idea when computers shifted, from the gray, model into ever bigger chips and stuff, until finally, there was a wall they hit, and then they changed and they developed multiple processors that were running in parallel. And so what I'm doing is I have like a concierge bot that is broadly familiar with the regenerative world. And then I have a specialist who is a TSP, support assistant, technical service provider. Then I have a specialist who is a broker. Then I have a specialist who is carbon market, who knows about carbon markets. And the concierge, when a client comes, and it's a subscription model that we're developing. So when a client comes in, he or she will get to the concierge, say, I'm looking for an aggregation. I have an order of X amount of 10 million pounds of whatever differentiated crop. There are multiple farmers who need to get into this. I need an aggregator. The broker at that point in time will start searching for who is available in your range. So it is an ecosystem, of specialists. And I mean, for example, I'm working with O3, ChatGPT O3 to program it's an Obsidian program. I mean, it's based on Obsidian, where you write the entire program. But for example, also I went to O3 and say, do a deep research on state-of-the-art global knowledge about soil science. And it went out for over 30 minutes, which is seems like a huge amount of time for an AI to go out and run stuff. And it came back with a 20-page report that is just stunning. I mean, it's just so what you can do with AI, if it is done with integrity and totally based on trust, right? I mean, you would have to totally trust me training these things in ways that is real, right? No games, no commercial sidekicks and all that stuff. The knowledge that you can the knowledge that you can gather there is just stunning. And so we'll go into a beta test mode within a couple of weeks and see how that plays out. And I'm working with Pete on getting it structured. So it's the most promising thing because it's zero cost, right? I mean, I pay $20 a month for my ChatGPT license. We will, of course, have to pay more once we go live with this thing. But by that time, you can start building a client base and you have a subscription model to do that.
Thanks, Klaus. Alex.
Hi. Right. A couple of things. I wanted to get him before Rick left, but he left. So, but he spoke very well about the we the we will do this, we will do that. And at the end of it, he actually did say that it's good from both sides to do this kind of exercise to see what the truth is. Let's call it that way, what the truth is. A couple of things I want to point out, though, is that for every example he gave, I can find people who have opposite examples. That's the first thing. So the AI making it possible for the two sides to meet, I think is a good thing and very, very relevant here, because there's I don't know which way you can see me here, but anyway, there's the truth so on my right, there's the lie on my left, and you've got graduated understanding between the two, and then you've got correlation versus causation, all sorts of things. What people think is the truth is a very complex thing, and it's not necessarily the AIs may help in that, and maybe they will be able to do something, but even if two facts are given to two different people, they may infer different things from that as the truth. So reference to the reason I'm saying that is because reference to the article that we were discussing, how can you control what the truth is? You can only control facts, but interpretations can be swayed by the politicians of the day or whatever. So legislating for that would be, in my opinion, has to be a very careful, and it's also a dangerous thing. But that's because I'm that way of thinking. There's a lot more people on both sides of the aisle that would say, no, we can do it this way or that way. So that was the first thing. The second thing was the middle class savings thing. I don't know who mentioned it. Gil mentioned the sort of old tradition of wiping out the debt, but someone else mentioned about the Louis the whatever and the French Revolution.
Yes, I think I might have.
I have a sorry.
I think I did.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I have a thing about this because I think, okay, I believe that we have gone totally, the Western democracy has gone totally into crony capitalism. I could talk to you for hours about it, but anyway, it's being controlled, right? But one of the things they've managed to do is piggyback over a whole load of issues, social and regenerative and green issues, whatever. And what they're doing is, instead of making it life, instead of the priority being make life better for everyone, they say, we must force you to do something via tax, change your car or whatever. What are they actually doing? They're forcing people with savings to spend it to keep the economy going. That's fine. But who benefits from it? The profits all go to the top 1% at the end of the day. And the more cloud-based and whatever we're based, that's where, to me, they're going. And I see a pattern there. Maybe nobody else does. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's the pattern I see. The other thing was, on the issue of multiple AIs, I use at least 8 to 10 AIs. I've created something that actually makes it easy for me to throw the same query across 4 or 5 AIs at a time, and then I cut and paste. I haven't made it more sophisticated. It's actually a very powerful weapon. If you're not doing it, do so. Use the free ones. Don't pay for it. It's actually really, really useful facility to think. And finally, Jerry, you mentioned neural nets in '89. I was working with neural nets in '89, tried to anyway, and didn't get very far. But at the end of it, I'll say something about neural nets, which fascinates me and relevance to what we're doing today. But that's it for now. Over and out for now.
Alex, thank you. Let me reflect on that moment for a second, because I was employee 15 or so at New Science Associates in South Norwalk, Connecticut. We had a little office 2 floors above the Portofino restaurant, which is no more. And we had one research service. New Science was an unfriendly spin out from Gartner Group. Gideon Gartner, three guys who worked for Gideon wanted to convince Gideon to start a research service around artificial intelligence. And he had just launched and failed on video text. He had had a bad experience with a new novel technology on video text. So these guys were conspiring in one of their kitchens to start a service and do their own little company. He got wind of it, fired them, hoping they would just sort of come back and ask for their jobs back. Instead, they went and started this little company, New Science, which in the course of a couple of years, had a couple $1 million worth of retainer market research business. So back in the day, it was about, I think it was 15,000 a year per research service. Gartner had a couple dozen research services, and New Science started with one. When I joined, I became their neural networks analyst, despite not being a coder and not knowing how to code neural networks. But I was like a really nice bridge between the geeks and the business people. It was fascinating that I was giving advice at this rate, 15 grand a year, for advice on which apps to do, what the possible domains were, et cetera. And in retrospect, from the point of view of January 2023, given that I just said that in December 2022, this thing just exploded and went crazy, how long Mount St. Helens took to blow its top. I mean, you could see the bulge. And I was just watching a couple of days ago, a reporter basically lands a helicopter on the slopes of Mount St. Helens 4 days before the top blows. And he's like, the cracks are steaming, and boy, this is kind of exciting, kind of dangerous. He's there with the geologist. They're busy talking about it. Everybody's been watching this bulge rise on Mount St. Helens, and then it blows and kills apparently 57 people, et cetera, et cetera. This is sort of what's happened here. And it seems naive to have been giving advice on neural networks in 1989, 90, whatever, because they couldn't do much. But we didn't know what they couldn't do and what they might one day do. And we didn't have anywhere near the data or the compute power to get to what they could do and what we got to. So it's a lovely little trip down memory lane for me to think about that. And then separately, when I had the good fortune of writing for Esther Dyson between 92 and 98. And the internet becomes a public utility in 93.45. The internet goes way further back to Paul Barron and research, defense-related research networks, et cetera, et cetera. You can read all about it, but it explodes into the public view in that little time frame. So as I'm writing the newsletter, this thing just obviously shows up and goes crazy. And all of a sudden, every issue I was writing was like, oh, the internet's going to change this, the internet's going to change that. And at some point, Esther actually pulled me aside and said, you've been writing a lot about the internet lately, and maybe you can sort of write about it. There's a whole bunch of other things in the world, so why don't you, take a beat and not write about the internet so much? So I'm like, okay, I'll do that. And then I think I wrote about kids and tech, ed tech and stuff like that. But at the end of the issue, I had to put in, but the internet's going to maybe do this and this. So a couple months later, Esther pulls me aside and says, remember how I asked you to not write about the internet so much? I'm like, yeah. She says, thank you for ignoring me. Because it was this gigantic change. And the internet, TCP/IP plus the web plus all these other things were ingredients necessary for the smartphone revolution later, which doesn't really happen until Steve Jobs says, oh, screw all these feature phones and dialing with your thumbs. We got this new thing in 2007 that absolutely explodes. And then it doesn't, like the App Store is this brand new thing, and we don't think about how this thing isn't just a phone and a voicemail machine anymore, and it can do email, but it's also all these other things, right? It's a movie theater. It's in fact a high definition video recorder. It's a GPS. It can solicit a car and let you drive, et cetera, et cetera. We've lived through all of these waves that I'm talking about, and we take them for granted at this point. So what's interesting to me is that the new Gen AIs are entering a world that has been instrumented and linked up and wired together so that when they start to automate and perform things autonomously, a word I will use gingerly, the world is right there to be like managed, controlled, changed, turned, tweaked, et cetera. We don't have to wait for everybody to wire everything in and make things accessible. Once we give the car keys over to the robots, the world has been set for them to go crazy. And so there's all these interesting kind of dependencies, contingencies, but layers of buildup that have gone to this moment. And it's really interesting to conjecture with you all where this might actually head, whether it's positive, negative, et cetera. And before I pass the mic to Mark, I want to just ask Mike, we've been drifting off topic considerably through the call. And if you feel like gently like bringing us back toward the questions that the article poses for us, please do.
I guess I am not too inclined, other than to say, because I'm a policy wonk in Washington, that we haven't spent a lot of time on do's and don'ts for policymakers. And I guess my biggest take home from this article is that policymakers have to be humble. Over and over, they say, look, we don't know which applications are going to be the most exciting. We don't know which applications are going to be the most risky and rewarding. And so I think that's a good lesson. But I'd be curious if other people got to the end of the article where they talk about the policy implications and were either firmly in agreement or found themselves a little unsatisfied because there wasn't enough substance there. It is a pretty short section, but that's partly because they're being humble.
Thanks, Mike. And gotta say, the policy implications of all this stuff are massive and touch everything. And it's really easy to be heavy-handed or to come in the wrong way on policy on this, like really, really easy. And all the people who have their hands on the knobs and levers of policy making are not the ones who are as smart as need to be on these topics. So it's a messy, messy moment.
You want to see that in action. Look at the Take It Down Act that just passed the Congress and will be signed by the president very shortly. Or if it's not signed by the president, his wife, Melania, who pushed it very hard, will be very upset. But I'm sure they're going to make a big deal about this. This is about taking down non-consensual intimate imagery. The focus and the news has been about fake deep fakes of naked people and people, avatars that are made to look like somebody. But most of it is actually going to have an impact on social media sites, particularly small ones that are now going to be told, you've got 24 hours. If someone calls you up and says, hey, there's a deep fake or there's some naughty pictures that were taken of me through a pinhole camera, take them down. And I don't know how this is going to work because there's a lot of naughty pictures out there and there's a lot of people who have complaints, and the act says, not just on your site, but you gotta kind of track down where it's spread and how many times it's been reposted, and so it's there is a nightmare that could develop out of this if the U.S. government takes it to the logical conclusion and decides it has to have AI checking everything, and that there's going to be some kind of ultra censor. And while it was designed for non-consensual intimate imagery, it could be that infrastructure could be used for all sorts of other things. Political speech, it could be used for copyright enforcement. I think we should be very worried because the act is so poorly written, and it does leave the door open to some very obvious abuse.
And for any legislation like that, you also have to verify the ID of the person making the claim. Like, we needed a copy of our marriage certificate recently. Couldn't find it in the house, and so I call up, and it turns out they need to vet that I'm me in order to get that document. And I was like, oh, right, you need to know that I'm actually me. So that was quite interesting. Mark, thank you for your patience. You are speaking and you are not muted, but we are not hearing you.
There we go. How about now?
Now we hear you just fine.
I've got too many peripherals.
Too many peripherals, but a voice made for radio. So go for it.
Well, thank you. I'm thinking about trying to make some money as a voice actor. Hooray.
Quick, before the AIs take that job too.
Well, it's interesting. I've been doing the research, and a lot of people are actively searching for non-AI voices, which is somewhat encouraging. My brain isn't what it used to be, which is fine. No complaints. But there's a term that when computers and their software get too powerful so that people can't understand them, there's a word for that that starts with an S. Um, I keep on getting synchronicity university, but it's not synchronicity university. It's the when the
Singularity?
that's it.
Singularity.
Thank you. So
Yeah.
that kind of link often, I have to pound and type in like when computers get too powerful and search for that. Um, and it's weird, but it's what it is. Um, to talk about policy a little bit, one of the most scary things for me is that surrendering too quickly to something that, again, the name of the Eastern European scholar who writes and wrote the book on tyranny, Snyder.
Timothy Snyder.
Thank you, Timothy Snyder. In the quantified self meetups, there was a guy who said, "I can't wait to, ask Siri every morning how to live my life." And another anecdotal point is, after meeting at Synchronicity University, going out to eat, there was another young scholar that basically said, politics is just another thing that can be hacked. Our computers will be machines of loving grace and be able to basically solve all political problems. And I had the existential gulp. No, I don't think that that's going to be the case. The case of persuasion for policy, and what I'm hearing in our conversation today, what strikes me is the notion of time. And our last conversation also, centered about this notion of, this saves me time. Well, our great future of labor-saving devices has not really been the future that we imagined in the 60s. This is rather silly, but I don't have a dishwasher. So it takes me a little more time to wash dishes. That's something I have learned to appreciate, but the values that people have is linked to something, and here's a big elite word, hermeneutics, the science of interpretation, in either philosophy or it really comes from interpretation of the Bible and the Jewish Bible, as well as the Catholic Bible. It is striking to me, as I've been doing my own research, how the people, a number of people, in this white Christian theology, of course, you kind of say, where's the kindness? And again, growing up in the go-go Orange County of the 80s, a lot of the Christian folk, I remember calling a Christian television station and kind of asking, you say this, that, and the other. And I was asked, are you Christian? He said, I was raised Catholic. And then the person on the other line said, well, you're going to hell. And I'm kind of going, well, how is that possible?
I'm glad they knew for sure. That's so important.
Yeah, it was the I'm here to convert you. I'm here to make you see things my way, and the consequences are dire. And that's my belief, and I'm never getting over it. And will you make a donation, please? And I'm juggling these concerns about human values with the things I'm hearing in this call. And, you know, you can lead a child to a book, but you can't make him read or her read or them read. You know, and when you do read something like, you know, in junior high school, Stephen Crane's The Red Badge of Courage, how does it affect you? I mean, I certainly remember reading 1984 in 8th grade in Animal Farm, and this was something that I would imagine 90% of 8th graders don't read these days. And that cultural difference, where I could say Ingsoc or war is love is hate or what have you, and that cultural divide, when it comes to policy, when it comes to what's important to people and how do they realize that importance so they may either support or resist the policy. You know, a lot of my career as somebody who deeply wrote software was actually an anthropological exercise on how to do buy-in, how to say your system, which you use and you're very comfortable, is changing. And we're going to change it together, and we're going to do it slowly so we don't drop down this bonk new software system that everybody freaks out about, and the profits dip until everybody picks up the new system, and then they gradually they may go higher, they may actually stay lower, people may quit. It is the soft skills, as I'm looking for work, that a lot of Inc. and Fortune and what have you are putting up a lot of articles about. Communicating with people is much more important than knowing ChatGPT or knowing how to write SQL. Performance is a very interesting notion in both anthropology and the study of art and art making. And we are performative creatures and social creatures. It seems to me the tendency is this reliance on machines. And one last thing, not to go deeper into reliance on machines, which I've mentioned before, is something somewhat as a amputation of learned habits of being human to rely on something else. But I was raised with hoarders, and I have collecting behavior. And I'm going through my old papers and throwing them out, and there's tons of things from the 80s and mostly the 90s about AI. About, I was on their advertisement list, and all of the applications from expert systems and they were AI at one time. And then came neural nets, and there's tons of neural net applications that are now in dryers, refrigerators, smart appliances, and they're now invisible. We don't have access to that kind of AI in our daily lives that is within our agency to control. Yes, I imagine there's plenty of smart dryers, and you can say, I want this and that. And when you put in mixed clothes, it'll, reduce the temperature so the colors don't bleed. I don't think a dryer has, AI vision to look at the clothes yet, but who knows?
Some do.
Yeah. Okay. Didn't know that. Thank you, Jerry. That's my, I guess, core question. How do we, as people who've lived through all of these changes, value our time in such a way that I'm hearing from Klaus, I'm hearing from Alex, I'm hearing from Gil, I can do this faster. And is faster always better? I remember Stuart Brand talking about, the value of place and where you live and what home is. And I don't think any of us are now at the moment, digital nomads that are going to Mallorca to code and make money and then flying to Bilbao and then going to the Maldives as a lifestyle. But there are so many that are. And what is it? Where do we put our roots down in terms of knowledge? In terms of, having that discipline? Is discipline necessary anymore? If we can always get a answer, which is good enough, as opposed to the kind of deep reasoning, the collegiate and collegial interaction that is highly political. When somebody who has a position can say, well, the AI says this, we're done. That's my concern. How to be more human rather than more machine-like. Thank you.
Thanks for the meditation, Mark. Gil.
If I could just jump on that for a moment. Mark, thank you for all of that. Really beautiful. Yes, do voiceover, voice acting, that'd be great. To your last point, yeah, I'm interested in how this helps us be more human, not be more machine-like. And I think the weird catch in the story is that we're building thinking machines based on a thinking machine model of human mind. And our models of human mind have evolved over the eras to match the technology of the time. It was mechanical, it was hydraulic, it was homunculi. Now, in the age of computers, we think about us and brains and minds as computers. And so, of course, when we're trying to build mind mimicking machines, we try to mimic the metaphor of mind that we have mimicking. It's this weird recursive loop. And being human is something far more mysterious and profound than that, which the AIs are simulating, but not duplicating. And the simulations are very useful in certain ways, and they're very not in other ways. And I agree with you, Mark. Going fast is not the only point. Sometimes going fast is useful. Sometimes going fast gives me the room to go slow in other areas, which is delicious and kind of surprising opportunity that opens up there. And with all this stuff, it's also deeply contextual about, for the sake of what are we doing these things? What is it that we're trying to get at? Who do we want to be? What supports us? What diverts us? And Mike, to your policy questions back a while ago, it seems that one of the difficulties here is that, like you said, there's good guys and bad guys. But the determination of who's a good guy and bad guy is very subjective, isn't it? Elon and I have really different ideas of who's good guys and bad guys and what kind of speeches. Yes, he actually used the word. Oh God, I don't have it here. I have to find it. He said something like immoral thoughts, or something like that, referring to the kind of speech that needs to be filtered out in the game. He's going to build really different filters than you would. We seem to have maybe some kind of consensus that there needs to be some kind of filtering, but by whom and how and for the sake of what and by what standards, and how do you propagate that across the society? I have no clue. It's hard enough. It's hard enough in just small human clusters. And to build general case applicable everywhere at speed, it's baffling. And the challenge is that we're going to find this out the hard way, because it ain't going away. Mark, one of the things you talked about was when Ken and Pete and I talked about this in Living Between Worlds a while ago. is that there's this tendency for people to treat these things as oracles and arbiters of truth. And they're not useful for that. They're useful to help us explore that, shape that, have conversations about that, facilitate our conversations about that. But I think the common societal tendency is going to take them as proof of stuff.
I have seen that.
Very dangerous territory.
I have seen that in enterprise software development over and over and over again. If the computer says it, it must be so. And this, one reflection on what you said, and then over to Alex. I have no life partner as of yet. And my experience with doing that with, how do you say, women, I find that in my life, just getting along with one other person is such a challenge. How do we do it with hundreds, with a globe, with a community? Certainly, you know, there's a difference when you have an intimate partner. Is an AI going to help me with an intimate partner? I, can figure that there's plenty of places that will take my money to say, yes, it will. Over to Alex.
Alex, you're muted.
Sorry, I keep shouting at the cats when you're not looking, so.
We appreciate that.
Right. Okay. I've probably said this before, but 2 years ago, I remember reading in a podcast, one of the AI, one of the wonder kids of AI, whatever, was talking about it. And one of the things they mentioned, which I haven't heard mentioned since, but one of the things they said was they trained AIs. Remember, these are primitive AI, or 2-year-old AIs now, with good data only. And then they trained AI with everything. They didn't sift any data out, right? And what they found was the results from the ones where you didn't sift out any of the bad data were about 15 or 20% better by whatever measure they had than the ones where they tried to actually limit the bad data going in. And it was as if the algorithm, I'll come to that in a second, as if whatever is going on behind the AIs appreciates the yin and the yang of a situation, right? Now, so I've always found that very interesting. So when people say we must be careful what to do, what does that mean? But the reason, I'm going to tie out something else. Jerry mentioned neural nets. I worked in neural nets around the same time as Jerry. And I don't know whether people appreciate that what you have now with the current AIs, or LLMs, more to the point, is based on neural nets. It was called neural nets, then it became machine learning. And then the LLMs are a special trick, a way of manipulating the data that's generated with neural net technology all the way to machine learning to create what we see now. And the other day, in fact, I was pondering on this again. I put a minor prompt in and I got a whole document out. And I thought, how is it possible? Now I know what the theory behind the LLMs is. It's the sequence and probability of one word following another. And I thought, how is it? There's no if then else coding in there. It's literally the relationship of words, or more to the point, probably the relationships of meanings of the words. And you can get a whole Word document for whatever subject you want. How on earth is that generated? Because, as I said, there's no if then else. So there must be something inherent in the mechanics of the data. Can you call it an algorithm? Is there a relationship? Now, I wouldn't go as far as saying, is that intelligence? Because I suspect intelligence is something a layer above it. But when we're all talking about all this now, about where we will be in 15 years' time and how we'll control it and how we'll do this, I think it's worth stepping back and saying, but how does it work in the first place? Because to me, it's almost miraculous that it produces the results it does. Remember, this thing is based on a relationship of words. If it had nothing, it was blank, and it said 1 + 1 = 2, and then you gave it 1, it would probably come up with a plus or an equal sign, just by sheer probability. If you gave it 1+ in that blank LLM, it would say 1 + 1, and then probably carry on and say =2, because that's all it knows. So we're able, with the technology of today, to put everything in and create every relationship without saying if this, then that. And we get some brilliant results coming out. Where does that link to the article we're discussing? It links because it worries me that we don't actually know why the data, the algorithm, whatever else is going on there, the script. I'm not a scientist, so I cannot tell you, I can't use the right words. Where are we going to be in 30 years' time?
Yeah.
And that is a layer separate from what we do with it in 30 years' time. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts. I want to discuss that further with people at some point.
Yeah, I think we may be overstating or over-relying on human minds' ability to do if then else, and that is the structure of thinking. I think we rationalize ex post, but mostly we're just in this like liminal space of n-dimensional forces with context that we've absorbed over our lifetimes, with social context that grew up around us and inhabits us, and some shit comes out. And then later we're like, oh yeah, I did this because it was the more sensible, whatever. One way of looking at this is that we actually are living in the matrix, and that what we're doing now with all these simulated intelligences, a word I will use gingerly, is we're actually approximating the matrix that we're in, and we're going to have like this weird moment where we've sort of reverse engineered how we actually work, because it's all just code, which I don't believe, by the way. But if we're living in a large simulation, maybe we're backing our way into how the simulation actually works, and this is like fruitful research because we're uncovering how it works. And then there's a bunch of other people who are like, yeah, these algorithms are completely wrong. We need something else like applied inference, or I always get the word wrong. Anyway, which is a path I don't actually believe in. Anyway, too many big questions to deal with. 8 minutes left to solve all the problems. And so we'll go to John, and then Gil, and then Klaus, and then Ken.
Can I just ask something?
John, if you're not
Can I just
responding
ask something? Hold on.
Gil, hold on. Alex, then Gil,
Could we
John.
perhaps, if there are qualified people, could we perhaps discuss it in some session in the future? Because I'd love to discuss this with people.
Can you frame it as a call topic and send me an email, and we'll make it a call topic? Just
Sorry,
that sounds great, Alex. Thank you, Gil.
John, is it okay if I jump ahead for a minute because I want to respond to Alex? Right. Alex and I have been in an experimental conversation about this for the last, a year and a half, I guess, something like that. We've been building a coaching bot based on my work, and so it's an experiment with it's sort of a weirdly controlled experiment. We've got a bot, and we've got me, and the bot is producing kinds of conversations with people that are in some way analogous to the kinds of conversations that I have with people in coaching conversations. And we agreed very early on that this could not be done with if then else, traditional programming control loops. There's something, we're trying to create an environment in which something emerges that is something like what we want to emerge. And we don't know, as Alex said, we don't know how it does that, but we have the ability to look at these two versions of something. And what's been fascinating for me in the process of doing that is that it's sort of guiding me to reflect on what is it that I do when I open my mouth. There are these words coming out of my body now. I don't know how that happens. Sometimes I'm choosing them. Mostly I'm not. What are they drawing on? Is there, I don't know about the matrix simulation thing. Is there code? I don't think so. There's a lot of associative processes. There's a little bit of carbon and a lot of water and more organisms in my body that are non-human than that are human. No fucking clue. But it's fascinating. We're playing in producing things that become I've been, the metaphor for me a lot lately is exoskeletons. You know, I could put on an exoskeleton that would let me lift 2 tons. I am putting on a cyber exoskeleton that lets me do different things in the world. And it's mysterious as hell and fascinating. And I would love to have Alex frame up the conversation. We'll go deeper on this with everybody. John, thanks for your patience.
Sweet.
Okay, and thank you for that. It melds greatly with what I was about to say. So
Excellent.
I'm facilitating the Democracy Impact Circle that meets at the portal in Marin. It's just slow going, but one of the ideas we're beginning to coalesce around is the idea of a democracy exoskeleton. Basically, that is there a form of AI that would work as a citizen assistant? And when we say work, we mean, not only be unhackable, but would detect and defend against the hacking of other people coming at you. In other words, it would detect the algorithmic choices of information that's being sent to you and contradict those, or say, no, it's not showing you this. You ought to take a look over here. But short of that goal, which is a stretch right now, would just be, hey, look, this is what's going on in the world, and this is how you could, if these are the things you care about, these are the ways you could express it, these are the ways you could take action, and so on and so forth. We're not at all sure that you can build this thing, and we're also aware that trying to build it, you could actually make things worse. We think with good intentions and good skills, it's more likely that we can make something better than something that's worse. But the meta above what we're doing is what several people here have already talked about, including the exoskeleton. It's like the way you find out, the way you get to be better about policy is to try something in a sandbox, in controlled and ethically reviewed contexts. And then you say, oh, yeah, we're trying this and we're trying that. Oh, we never imagined that the AI would do this, or that it could do that, or we didn't understand how it does these things. But this is all part of the learning that we're all doing, and we all need to do more of quickly if we're going to get the benefits and avoid the catastrophe that is AI.
Thanks, John. Klaus.
Yeah, another fascinating experiment I had with talking with AI. I've been really intrigued with Yuval Harari being quite passionate about calling AI alien intelligence. So he coined this term. It's not really artificial, it's an alien intelligence, and he's super concerned about where this is going to lead us. So I had this conversation with ChatGPT 4.5, and I asked it, well, how would you rate yourself? And the AI at first was completely adamant that I'm artificial. I mean, I'm driven by algorithms and data that I've been fed with, and so on and so on. And then I played it. I asked it to do research on Yuval Harari and his argumentation. And so it give me a summary. So it did this, and I said, so now I want you to reconsider your first response about this alien versus artificial and so on. And it was, well, yeah, there is something to it. Basically, there is a certain opaqueness that comes from the way I respond. That's different from a way humans would respond, and even my programmers oftentimes don't understand how I came up with stuff that surprises them and that is beyond my original programming. But then I did the same conversation with Aiden Cinnamon Tea, and with Cork. And so what the consensus was that the reason why the intelligence is so different is not that it comes up with something that was completely unknown, but that it coalesces basically 10,000 years of written documentation about human thought. Right? I mean, you can ask AI about what did the Stoics say, or what did Goethe really mean by what he was saying, and it's boom, it's right there. And so the sheer volume of data it has access to creates a composition of thoughts, that goes beyond us, because we can't possibly frame that much data and that much knowing. But it clearly rejected the idea of alien in a sense of beyond human, if that makes sense. So it is linked to our own evolution, our own cognitive evolution, and can't really move beyond it other than working with the data that we have provided to it, if that makes sense.
Oh, thank you. We are miles underground in a lovely conversation, but we're kind of out of time. Apparently, we have a new pope.
History was just made. We have a new pope.
We have a new pope, Abemus Papam.
That's what Gil typed 1 minute ago.
Yep, which is very interesting. And his name is not among the candidates I had heard of who were prospective pope. So it's new to me.
Dominique Mamberti, and I don't have any background on him.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a Wikipedia page on him. Small thing. The day that Benedict was named pope, a week after that, Jimmy Wales gave a talk in San Francisco, which I attended. I was sitting in the front row, kind of, and he started out by saying, I've been receiving a lot of congratulatory emails from journalists and others about how quickly Wikipedia had a page on the new Pope Benedict. And he laughs and he's like, well, yeah, we had a page on all the major cardinals. All somebody did when the white smoke went up was change the name, change the name of the page, add a paragraph or a sentence or three at the top that said, on this date, he was elected Pope by the conclave. He took the name Benedict the 13th or whatever it was, and hit save.
I learned back in my journalism days that the New York Times has, substantial, including 2 full-page obituaries built already.
You have to preload obits. You have to preload obits. Like the obituary writer can't do all that research on a dime, and people die unexpectedly. It's really weird. But I tell this story about Wales describing Wikipedia often because nobody understands how knowledge accrues. Nobody understands that knowledge should accumulate and that is actually a lovely thing for society to have. So who knows? Now, I'm quite certain that Ken, whom we have missed, whose participation we have missed, and whose poems we have especially missed, has found a poem that will quite perfectly encapsulate the sense in all of our pits of our stomachs right now.
That's a high bar,
isn't it?
So there is a reason I'm going to read this poem, because AI has a very small part it's played in it. About 33 years ago, I was in a bookstore, Oliver's Books in San Anselmo, and I read a poem, and the only line I can remember was "The name of the earth is Juan." And it popped up in my head the other day, and I went to ChatGPT and I said, "Can you help me locate a poem that has the line, 'The name of the earth is Juan'?" And it did. So that's the AI connection. And it's close. The poem is slightly different. It's called, let me get it here, "The Earth's Name is Juan," and it's by Pablo Neruda. Behind the liberators stood Juan, working, fishing, and fighting. At his carpentry bench or in his damp mine, his hands have plowed the land and traced the roads. His bones are everywhere. But he lives. He returned from the earth. He was born. He was born again like an eternal plant. All the impure night tried to drown him, and he now asserts his indomitable lips in the dawn. They bound him, and now he's a determined soldier. They wounded him, and he still keeps his ample fresh strength. They cut off his hands, and today he strikes with them. They buried him, and he returns singing with us. Juan, the door and the road are yours. The earth is yours. People, truth was born with you from your blood. They could not wipe you out. Your roots, tree of humanity, tree of eternity, today are defended with steel, today are defended with your own greatness in the Soviet homeland, armored against the dying wolf's bite. People, from suffering order was born. From order your banner of victory was born. Raise it with all the hands that have fallen. Defend it with all the hands now joined. Let your invincible force faces march forward to the final battle towards the star in unity.
And the name of that again was?
I'll post it. It's called "The Earth's Name Is Juan" by Pablo Neruda, and it's from a much longer piece, his canto. But that's was stuck there in the middle, and it's obviously it's about the Spanish or the reclamation of so many Latinos who have been under the heel of colonialism. Like we just keep coming back. You kill us, and we keep propping back up.
Mm-hmm.
I will listen to Neruda anytime.
I love Neruda. Thank you very much, Ken.
You're welcome.
There's a book, The Open Veins of
Latin America,
which is just frightening to read. But thank you.
Thank you all. That was Ken. We've missed your skill at the end of our calls. Welcome back, and see you all in a week.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Thank you, Jerry.
Bye.
Thanks all.
Welcome back, Ken.
Thank you.